And as we discuss and look at this year into perspective, we obviously remember fallen colleagues, comrades to COVID, and others who God has decided to take away. And we must say we count ourselves lucky for being spared to be part of 2022. My guest to discuss this is founder of Bridges Limited. He's a former communications advisor at the IMF and also a former managing director, or should I say director general of Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation, as well as a consultant in Mr. Chiwamba Kanyama. Happy New Year and festive greetings to you, Mr. Kanyama. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Costa, and Happy New Year to you as well.
So much really to bite into, and I'm excited, both home and away, and some of those things that I've quickly touched on. I think the biggest stories really that we can break down to globally are COVID, governance, and climate change. Let's begin really with the issue of COVID-19. All started in December in Wuhan, China of 2019. 2020, people thought things would get better, but it still, came into 2021 with one of the most deadliest variants in the Delta. And obviously towards the later end of the year, the Omicron variant. Apart from the health, cycle distortion that COVID has brought about and claiming lives, the economic, downturn has also seen economies, labs, supply chains, and all that. In your perspective, let's get to break down COVID and how it affected the global economy.
Well, we have had the biggest impact in 2020, largely because it wasn't anticipated. Nobody really knew how long it would impact the global and domestic economies. The major part of the impact was in the value chains, supply chains. Supply chains in the sense that this is a global village today. Countries import supplies, raw materials from others. And apart from that, the shipments which go across borders. So we already witnessing in Europe that the price is actually going up now because of the huge disruption in the supply chains. The USA government, for the first time, really talked about registered huge supply shortfalls. In Zambia here, we had the biggest impact coming through South Africa because even if we don't lock down economies here, the South African economy locked down significantly, and that is where we get both our raw materials, which are used for inputting most of the companies, and that's also where we get most of the finished products that we consume. So we saw how prices went up in Zambia. Prices by December last year, 2020, were really shooting. Inflation sometime mid this year hitting 23.2%, the highest in over a decade, and it was threatening. And this tells you about the impact of COVID. However, the impact is not as much as we had before for three main reasons. Number one, we are able to model, scientists are able to model the variant. And this means they can predict when the third round will come, when we're going to experience the third wave, the fourth wave that we have now. So we were well prepared ahead of time for what we are experiencing today. And
I wanted to just delve, deeper into the issue of supply chains faltering that you've tackled, and quoting, the Global Times of the UK. Supply chains, like you rightly say, became a household term in 2021. And obviously, COVID-19 exposed the downside of supply chains and shortages this far. I want to tackle a few issues just to jog your mind or your memory on some of the issues. The ship Evergreen, you remember, that got stuck in the Suez Canal, blocking one of the world's major waterways for a week. And a loss out of that was about 9.6 billion US dollars a day. Thereafter, we saw, due to COVID and some of these, supply chains faltering, a shortage of computer chips, motor spare parts, and all this again lingering around from COVID-19. Workforces in terms of those that depend on external labor in big, manufacturing companies. How did this impact things like the global GDP, which was projected to grow by 5.7% in 2021?
Well, I know that the IMF World Bank will soon be revising the GDP. The consumer index is a significant indicator of GDP. That's why in developed economies, they measure consumption, consumer value, as a prospective indicator of how the country will grow, because the two are related. Supply and demand are related. And this is what we call the circular flow of income between the household and the firm. And money flows along there. Whether we're talking about the foreign exchange in terms of imports and exports, the economy is global today. And it also indicates to us the interrelationships among countries, and not only among countries, but across different sectors and economies. So when you are talking about the resource-rich country, which produces cobalt, which goes into my computer chips, and then you have some blockage somewhere, you can supply computers, it means the manufacture of those computers reduces demand on cobalt, and we produce some of those materials, whatever are used for manufacturing of microchips, which are found in the Congo DR. Now, that impact reverses backwards. It goes backwards to the supplier of that raw material, and the supplier of the raw material will not be able to employ more people. At times, they even declare employees redundant. Why? Is because the value chain, supply chain has been disturbed somewhere. The circular flow of income is not circulating the way it should grow. And that is why you'll find the GDP levels globally will slightly reduce in 2021.
Obviously, like you say, from 2020, the world started getting a grip through science of the mutation and indeed the virus. Come 2021, the most recent obviously has been, Omicron, which South African scientists detected, though we're told it may have started far earlier than in South Africa. Following that, obviously, travel bans, which have since, been reversed. The key question there, Mr. Kanyama, how has Africa, being impacted? And in this, we can also take Zambia, in that we seem to be on the back foot on this, COVID pandemic in terms of lockdowns, vaccines, and so on. And let me quickly tackle the issue of vaccine, because it was in August of 2021 that vaccines arrived. And obviously, scientists say it takes about 10 to 15 years to come up with a vaccination for things like smallpox, polio, measles, and so on, or even 4 years. But this one, done in less than a year. We're talking Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca. And obviously, Africa, depending on donations through COVAX and other initiatives through the African Union. How has COVID impacted Africa, and how should we be making a turnaround?
I don't really think that the impact on Africa has been as significant as we anticipated initially. When COVID came on the scene 2020 or December 2019, we felt that Africa would be the most hit because they were the least prepared, had the weakest infrastructure, medical infrastructure, poor. But fortunately, we have seen that the death rates been very, very low, lowest in comparative terms. And in terms of the population, death and the transmission of the pandemic among Africans, bring this home to Zambia, we are not industrialized. And industrialization means that the bulk of the people are working, the bulk of the people are producers, the bulk of the people are employed. That is not the case in Africa. It's not the case in Zambia. The bulk of the people are in the villages, they are either in the farms or they are not doing anything. So the productive workforce that is hit by COVID will be impacted is very low. That's why even when you're talking about vaccines today, the government is targeting mainly the working force, because this is the productive sector that if it is hit hard, then you begin to see a drop in growth, drop in productivity overall in any respective country. But because the productive group is very low, in Zambia, we're talking about just about 2 million people in formal employment, just about there, the impact is not as much as to affect a developed country like France, because once it hits there, you know, people are it's industrialized, people are together, and the impact to be very significant to be felt. So I really feel the impact for us has come through the lockdowns, through the supply chains. That is where we registered much of the slack.